The following information is proudly brought to you by the National Center for Wellness.
Can you talk a little bit about the top 5 reasons that mothers choose to give birth in water?
Well, from in the beginning of my career with Women in Water, um, I used to say to them, can you imagine doing the hardest work that you'll do in your whole entire life while soaking in a hot tub? So the most women will choose to labor in water because they've heard of its relaxation properties,
Right.
that it allows them to relax. And the second reason is that it allows them to get into any position that they desire. So their body says, move this way, they can move that way. It says, move this way. They can kneel, they can lie down, they can lean over the side, they can be on hands and knees, as long as the water can support them. So that really attracts a lot of women, that it really returns the process of giving birth to them. I think one of the other big reasons is that the water provides a cocoon. It's a safe place, and women just look at the water or the tubs, like when they're touring a hospital or a birth center, and they'll see the tub and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, that looks beautiful. I want to be in that tub. I feel safe there." So, if you ask women where they dream about giving birth, no one will tell you they dream of giving birth on a bed with their feet up in stirrups.
No?
No, not a single person. But they will tell you dreams of giving birth in rivers and lakes and even oceans. And so there's something, maybe through our evolutionary process. There's a number of books, anthropological books, written about the possibility that we had an aquatic period of maybe a couple million years.
Okay.
So I think there is something genetically to that, and some women are just drawn to the water. That's a fourth reason. They're just simply drawn to it. When I first started promoting water births and researching water births in the mid-1980s, there was a small group of people that all did the same thing, but we were on different continents. So Europe, Asia, Australia, the U.S., even South Africa, India. There was this kind of global awareness that mushroomed in the mid 80s, and I was just very happy to be part of that. What I have witnessed over the years was not a super intelligence, was not a like putting your hand on a book and being able to tell you what was inside of it.
Right.
That kind of thing. Those were the stories that kind of came out of Russia. What I have witnessed, though, in what mothers have told me and the hundreds of births that I've been to, is that these babies coming out are awake, aware, conscious, and right with you from the very moment they open their eyes. And sometimes they open their eyes underwater when they come out into the tub that contains their mother and sometimes their father. It's as if it's a womb with a view. It's an expanded womb,
right.
And the baby feels warm and comforted, and there's no pressure. It's an easy transition from womb to room, and the baby's gently lifted up and put onto the mother's chest. And what we have witnessed by keeping the cord intact, by not cutting the cord, by allowing the placenta to give that baby all of its T cells, all of the immune factors that it needs, by giving it an enormous amount of blood. Almost 40% of its postpartum blood comes from the placenta. Well, we did all that in our early practices of water birth, and of course those children are going to be different, because they weren't deprived of their physiologic process of transition. They needed that blood for their heart, their lungs, their liver, their kidney, their gut, and their skin to regulate their temperature and things like that. And then coming to this place right here, the mother's chest, the babies also were able to transition and say, in building their brain architecture at that very moment, they're able to say, "Oh my God, I chose the right place. This is fantastic." And water birth is for women who don't choose drugs.
Right.
And so if a mother does choose an epidural, if she does choose narcotics, the baby is going to be impacted. And there's no way to avoid that.
Right.
And we're going to have some feedback from women that say, "Well, I had an epidural and my baby was fine." And yeah, your baby's fine to a point. And I will argue that case with the research, and that's the book that I'm working on right now. So water birth in and of itself does not make the child a special being.
Right.
The baby is a special being to begin with.
Absolutely.
And water birth enhances and eases that process for the baby to be born gently and easily and to receive everything that it needs to start life in a very positive way. And you just build from that. Now, the parents that chose water birth in the very beginning, and even today, there is some amount of pre-selection, let's say.
Okay.
Just, I'm looking at you. You were awake, aware, conscious, and said, "I want the best for my child." And you probably had read the research that said that babies are going to be impacted by any drugs or interventions that might not be necessary. So you chose a very a gentle process for that child, and the child is going to be different because of that.
Right. You're absolutely right. There's epigenetic research now that definitively shows the effect of the decisions we make and how that impacts the gene expression of the child. You're absolutely right.
And the research is overwhelming. Even the early research on the effects of the epidural on the baby, the epidural drugs, the narcotics, and the anesthetic that the mother takes uploads into the baby's gray matter of the brain within 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And Sapkowski and their group of researchers proved that those drugs stay on board. The narcotic base of that drug, fentanyl, stays on board with the baby, sometimes for up to a week, sometimes up to 30 days.
It's amazing. I mean, it makes perfect sense why they created the APGAR score, because you need to monitor for any change from normal to make sure that the baby's doing okay. Whereas oftentimes, vibrantly, a baby born in a water birth is experiencing the same environment that they were just in inside the body, still in that water environment. And it's very natural, very easy transition for them into the world.
You know what, Rob? We have never seen normal until water birth.
Okay. From the very beginning, we've been trying to separate with intervention mom and baby, and yet they come attached for a reason. It's almost like the more we try to improve on Mother Nature, the further we get away from health and wellness. And so it's like at every turn we try to make a step forward, or we try to improve on something. And in doing so, we've actually demoted the process and had to take another turn that, if you look at what we used to do 50 years ago, we don't still do those things now. If you look at what we did 25 years ago, we don't do those things now, which means if you look 50 years or 25 years in the future, we are absolutely not going to be giving birth the way we give birth, because there are so many things that just logically don't make sense. So
we have forgotten what physiology actually means.
Right.
And when I teach in medical schools, I get a lot of third-year medical students, and I teach them to leave the cord intact, to not cut the cord, that the placenta will birth itself, and and I go through water birth, and we talk about that the baby actually initiates the labor, that the baby, you don't have to induce mothers,
Right.
that the baby initiates the labor and knows what to do to get out, and has a biological imperative to move through the birth canal all on its own, even if the mother were in a transcendental meditation state or unconscious, the baby would
Can
be
still.
born.
Right.
And I show them the films, and their mouths drop open, and
Right.
they say, "Oh my God, but we weren't taught this. How do we go back and change our professors?" And I always tell them, I said, "You know what? You're now responsible.
Right.
2 hours ago, you weren't responsible. But
Right.
now that you know the information, it's up to you to change this in your own world and in your own practice." Water.
Okay.
We don't want a woman on drugs or an epidural to be in the water. We do put limits on some things. If she has a potential infection, if she has an infection or a fever,
Makes sense.
you don't want to necessarily get into a hot tub to have your baby. If she's bleeding more than normal,
Okay.
it might be a placental abruption or a rupture of some kind. And so, it's not like we throw women into the hot tub and just leave them there.
Right.
We monitor the situation exactly how we would monitor her if she were on the bed. We use a fetoscope or a Doppler to listen to the baby's heart rate. And if either mother or baby are not doing well, then she leaves the tub.
Sure.
So we don't see the complications of childbirth in the water because we screen the women so carefully. My water birth rate with women in my own private practice was about 95%.
I was going to say the statistical abnorm to anything is at 3 to 5%. So, when you get into that 95, it makes total sense that would be the number. And you'll never be 100% because that's not a reality in life. But
no,
there's always that statistical edge that keeps statisticians in business. But it makes sense.
Now that I've been doing this for 30 years, in my classes, I ask, we do introductions, and I say, are you a medical student? Are you a doctor? Are you a midwife or whatever? And in one of my classes last year, this woman raised her hand and she said, "You didn't ask if anyone was born in water in this group."
Oh, that's
and
great.
I went, oh my gosh, were you born in water? And she goes, "Yes, I'm 23 years old. I'm a first year medical student, and I was born in my mother's bathtub."
Awesome. You're like, I have to add a question to my intro. That's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the one big complication today with water birth, if the mother is screened properly and the baby is screened properly, you won't see complications. Doctors, pediatricians often say, "Well, you're hiding your statistics. You're hiding the babies that drown." Well, babies can't drown. It's physiologically impossible.
Right.
And I'm just going to put it at that. It's just physiologically impossible.
Well, they don't take their first breath till they hit air. So if you're underwater, you're not going to breathe until you have the oxygen reflex anyway. So that makes sense.
That's why I say it's a womb with a view. So the biggest complication is extra laundry from all the towels and mopping up floors, and maybe tubs that might slosh water or collapse. I've seen everything in my 30 years.
You're great. That's true.
Absolutely.
So how do you help women convince their doctors or hospitals to start offering water birth if they currently don't offer it?
I get that question every single day, usually 5 or 6 times a day by email. Off of my website, people write in and say, "I want a water birth at my hospital." And they look at me with cross eyes and say, I'm silly. But it can be done, and we have done it, and we are doing it every single day. And that is taking that CD with, I will email articles to anybody on the efficacy of laboring physiologically in the water and giving birth in water. And you need three ingredients. The first one's pretty easy to find: a mother who won't take no for an answer.
Love them.
The second ingredient is a doctor that is willing to look at the research, willing to go in front of his colleagues and say, hey, this isn't a bad idea. Actually, it's a really good idea. And if we do this, do you know that we can have XYZ number of women come from all these other cities, because we'll be the first ones to do this.
Right.
Look at your own state of New Jersey in Morristown. I'm going to be there in November.
They're great.
And one midwife group there has a 40% water birth rate for their patients. They come from New York. They come from Philadelphia. They come from all over New Jersey to go to Morristown Community Hospital because they offer that service.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. You're absolutely right.
No, the third ingredient is a cooperative nurse manager of the labor and delivery unit. I tell mothers all the time, make her your new best friend. Bake her an apple pie, but only with stevia. And gluten-free crust. Okay, but no, take food to the unit, and make these nurses. They're not. The hospital is not the enemy.
No,
we need
not.
We need to educate them with love and with kindness, and because after I teach my seminars, usually there's 4 or 5 nurses that come to me and say, I'm so glad you came here. I want to have a water birth.
Yeah,
and older nurses say, gosh, I wish I could still give birth. I would do it this way. Because once women hear about it, they want it, whether they're a pediatrician, an obstetrician, or a labor and delivery nurse. So that person, the nurse manager, the head of the maternal child health department of any hospital, any medical center, carries a lot of weight. She has to have committee meetings, and she has to get people to advocate for you. And
just in addition to your conferences, were your books. You've got 2 of them here. You've got Water Birth, a contemporary guide for parents and providers. Tell me the background of that. What do you want listeners to know about that book?
Well, that it will be out next year in 2014, and that you'll be able to take that. I'm doing that as a public service. You'll be able to take that book into your hospital doctor, nurse midwife, and say, here, this is the guide.
Perfect.
To be able to start a practice in water birth. It'll have all of the annotated bibliographies and studies and why, who should be included, who should be excluded, why, what the reasons are. And there's lots of stories from mothers. We have on my website at waterbirth.org, there's a place where you can register your babies who've been born in water. And to date, we have close to 10,000 women who have put their baby's first name, middle name, date of birth, and place of birth on the website. And over 3/4 of those women have also told me their birth stories.
Oh, wow.
So we're pulling some of the favorite birth stories out of there and putting them into that book.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. And that's a great resource for other women who are thinking about this as an option and whether they want to give birth or not. I think nothing tells a story better than someone who's actually been there and relates their story. I think that drops a lot of the barriers and makes it very accessible to understand, get over some of the fears, the questions, the concerns, whatever it might be. That's wonderful. So
we're not talking about intelligence. We're talking about emotional intelligence. And then if you separate mothers and babies at birth and you don't promote breastfeeding and it's the baby, as I mentioned before, that's the driver. Well, that baby coming to the chest actually changes the wiring of the mother's brain.
Right.
And the mother will make a decision in the first hour of her birth whether or not she's going to go back to work, whether whether or not she's going to breastfeed for the next year or 2 years or 3 years. So much happens in that first hour, and we have so messed it up. And this book gives you not just the diagnosis, but it also gives you how to repair those ruptures. So you have a 5-year-old that was born by cesarean. What do you do? Well, you do craniosacral. You do, you unwind these babies. You treat the children. I don't care if you're 99 years old. You can fix it. You can rewire your brain. You can reprogram, and I've done the research on the diagnosis, and now I'm doing I've been attending a lot of seminars, and I became a certified craniosacral, infant craniosacral therapist, just so I could say I've done this with babies. And I've seen babies, I've seen 8-month-olds crawl to the breast and attach, even though they didn't breastfeed, because of a cesarean. I've seen babies stop their night terrors. I've seen 3-year-olds stop wetting the bed. I've seen all kinds of things get healed because of that. And that it's a book of hope. It's embracing the miracle.